This is the biggest news story in America. The president fired him on a recommendation from the FBI's career internal investigators. And despite all the attention this firing is getting, as a practical matter, it doesn't mean that much. McCabe was set to retire in days anyway. And contrary to news reports, he is not at risk of losing most of his enormous federal pension, much bigger than the pension you're not getting. But none of this has stopped the usual hysteria merchants from predicting the end of the republic. Some have accused the White House of obstructing justice. It's hard to see how that works exactly, since McCabe was leaving anyway. Others have called the firing an assault on democracy, as if unelected career bureaucrats found guilty of misconduct by their own agencies were somehow the linchpin of representative government. Once again, how do all these dumb people get jobs on television? That's another show. But tonight, there are really only two questions that actually matter here. First, did Andrew McCabe do anything wrong? And two, if so, did it justify his firing? Well, according to the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility, McCabe allowed FBI agents to disclose sensitive information to the press, leak. He then lied to federal investigators about what he did. That's what the investigation found. Now, if McCabe really did that, losing his pension ought to be the least of his worries, because lying to the FBI is a felony. Try it and find out. Martha Stewart went to prison for that. Michael Flynn had his life destroyed over it. Mere mortals are not allowed to lie to the FBI. They wind up in handcuffs when they do. And of course, it's a far greater threat to all of us when FBI officials lie. The FBI is the most powerful law enforcement agency in the world. It has near absolute power over you, the power of life and death. Yet weirdly, nobody on CNN seems bothered in the slightest by any of this. One of the FBI's top officials caught lying about an active investigation? Whatever. No big deal. Punishing him is the crime here. That's an odd response if you think about it. Would CNN panelists show concern if, I don't know, a local sheriff lied in order to frame teenagers for crimes they didn't commit? How about if your local police department fabricated evidence? Dishonest law enforcement is a big deal, no matter who the president is. In fact, it's the biggest deal. It's the worst abuse of power. And yet, for some reason, our designated watchdogs, the very people who are supposed to be protecting us from this kind of third world nonsense, think it's totally fine, as long as the net result is a bad news cycle for Trump. Watch.
This kind of thing that we saw with respect to Andrew McCabe is the kind of thing you would expect Putin to do.
My problem is the timing and the way it all worked. It just seemed mean-spirited.
The point is to tear down the credibility of all people involved with anything pertaining to anything that might look into this president, which leads one to believe that this is authoritarian behavior.
There are kids getting shot in our schools. There's an epidemic of people dying from overdoses. And what is the president minding? These little vindictive, small, let's get rid of McCabe and let's deny him his pension.
So whether you agree or not with the politics of the people you just saw, those are buffoonish points. Here's something that's not buffoonish, though. Over the weekend, the former head of the CIA, John Brennan, came completely unglued over McCabe's firing on Twitter, Twitter being the place where people like that now go to lose their minds. Here's the quote. "When the full extent of your venality, moral turpitude, and political corruption becomes known," Brennan wrote to the president, "you will take your rightful place as a disgraced demagogue in the dustbin of history," fingers smoking as he typed it. But here's the interesting part. In response to Brennan's tweet, the one you just heard, former UN Ambassador Samantha Power wrote this, quote, "Not a good idea to piss off John Brennan." Let that sink in. What the hell does that mean? The former head of the CIA is going to do what exactly in response? No wonder people are afraid of the deep state. This is what it looks like when it bares its fangs. Thwart us and we will destroy you. In case you're looking for a real threat to American democracy, and there are some, there you go. Alan Dershowitz is an emeritus professor at Harvard Law School, and he joins us tonight. Professor, it seems like there's only one of two options. Either the FBI internal investigators are corrupt and lying, or Andrew McCabe, the former deputy director, is corrupt or lying. Are there other options? And if so, which one of those is right?
Well, there's a very simple way of finding out. Let McCabe waive his right of privacy and demand that the public see the Office of Investigation report, the Office of Professional Responsibility report. Then we can decide for ourselves whether or not this was a corrupt investigation or whether or not, in fact, McCabe is guilty of what I have called test lying. And Comey is guilty of testifying because, remember, their testimony today conflicts. McCabe basically says that he was authorized to make the leak by the head of the FBI. And the head of the FBI has said under oath that he has never authorized anybody to make a leak. So this whole issue of testifying, which was on the front page of the New York Times just yesterday, is front and center. When the guardians need to have guardians, when the people who are supposed to protect us are testifying falsely for whatever reason, we, the public, have a right to know about that.
Well, absolutely. And we want to live in a country where we can trust our most basic institutions like law enforcement and the judiciary. So, but put this in context for us. Well, I guess I don't know. I have not seen the report. And I'm taking it at face value, and maybe I shouldn't. My real point, however, is that the allegation is a very serious one, that the deputy director of the FBI might be lying about a current criminal investigation. Why are so many others dismissive of that, like it's no big deal? Larry Tribe, your former colleague at Harvard, for example. Why?
Because everybody is so involved in this partisan conflict that anything that's done against Trump must be good according to the partisans on one side, and anything done against Trump must be bad according to the partisans on the other side. Remember, from day one, I said, do not appoint a special counsel. Have a nonpartisan investigative commission like the Commission of 9/11 that has incredible trust and that doesn't have a partisan dog in this race. And they have to be the ones to make this decision. Right now, the FBI has lost its credibility. The CIA is losing its credibility. Congressional committees aren't trusted by either side. It's not too late to convene a nonpartisan, congressionally authorized investigative commission to look into whether there was collusion, whether the Russians tried to interfere. Of course they did, but we need to have the evidence, and how to stop them from doing it again. That's what the American public is interested in, not finger-pointing by both sides.
So let's just very quickly take Trump out of this, and if you could just send a message to your lifelong fellow liberals who care about civil liberties about the stakes here. What would it be like to live in a country where the chief law enforcement agency was actually corrupt, where its leaders were lying about investigations? How might that affect liberals down the road, would you say?
Well, I have a message for both sides. You know, historically, it's been the liberals and the Democrats who haven't trusted the FBI, haven't trusted the Justice Department, and have said, let's make sure that we have oversight. And it's been the Republicans and the conservatives who said, oh, anything the FBI says has to be correct, has to be true, even J. Edgar Hoover. Now we've seen it all flip because partisanship has overcome principle. And my message to both Democrats and Republicans is get back to principle and stop this partisanship. The American public is interested and cares about the truth from a nonpartisan point of view. They're sick and tired of a Republican truth, a Democrat truth, a Trump truth, an anti-Trump truth. We need the truth in a nonpartisan way.
Right. You want your people with guns to be on the level, for sure. Professor, thanks for reminding us of that. I appreciate it. Richard Goodstein is an attorney. He advised both of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaigns and often joins us on the set as he does tonight. Richard, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
So try to take, as I just said to Professor Dershowitz, try to take Trump out of this if you can. Here you have a story where the #2 guy at the FBI is accused, not by partisans, but by the FBI's own internal investigation of lying in the course of a criminal matter. Why are Democrats acting like it's wrong to be upset about that? What world is this?
Well, Tucker, I've been on the show many times where you start with this very earnest presentation. You have a very erudite guest validating it. Struck emails, struck a secret society, Uranium One, unmasking, wiretapping Trump Tower, and they end up being big nothings. And this is another misdirection by people who are just concerned about the walls closing in on Donald Trump. But here's my answer to your specific question. The Inspector General report will come out this spring. Let's wait, maybe wait, to see what he says. McCabe was not afforded due process. He basically had all these accusations thrown at him. You and others are saying they obviously must be true. Maybe, maybe
not. But what are you saying is really the question I'm asking.
I'm saying,
hold on. No, are you suggesting that, I mean, for what we know, And if you have contrary evidence, obviously tell us now live. But from what we know, the internal investigation at the FBI recommended that he be fired. That's not a small thing. Are you suggesting that they're corrupt too? They're somehow in the pocket of Trump?
I'm saying that prosecutors all the time make recommendations that ultimately higher-ups decide to...
Prosecutors. This was the IG. This was the internal investigation.
I'm just saying that they're internal people who make recommendations. Sometimes they're acted on. I bet you Jeff Sessions has never acted on one at 10 p.m. on a Friday night.
That may or may not be true. I don't know. Well, but it doesn't change. Hold on. It doesn't change the fact that this is a very serious allegation that ought to scare the hell out of you as an American citizen, and it was made by people who are not obviously political. Their career, they probably don't even like Trump. A lot of people over there don't seem to. But they said it anyway, and now you've got Larry Tribe and other buffoons with college degrees standing and being like, oh, yeah, this is, fascism. Really? What's fascism?
Yeah.
It's ignoring corruption for the sake of politics.
Well, you're assuming something. Again, I would say let's wait until the Inspector General report came out. Here's what we know, or at least it's been reported, that the story that apparently McCabe went to the press, I don't think it was a leak. He went to clarify something. I don't think you'd call that a leak. And ultimately, that reporter wrote an anti-Hillary story. So somehow, this is, frankly, an Alice in Wonderland, a twisted version of what the FBI did.
But that's not the question. Well, the question, and the pretext upon which he was fired was that he lied about it. And that's the way the FBI works. You don't have to have committed wrongdoing to commit a felony.
He disagrees with that.
Seriously?
Michael Flynn has pled guilty.
I'm aware.
Yeah.
And so, by the way, did Martha Stewart.
Right.
And I breathed easier when she was put away because she was an imminent threat to America. Actually, all she did was lie to federal agents. This guy's accused of that, and yet somehow the left is like, oh, no big deal. So is that the standard?
So my guess is he's not going to plead guilty, and if the Justice Department wants to bring charges against him, his attitude is bring it on.
Okay. Let me ask you this. This is the part that actually really bothered me, and the behavior of John Brennan bothers me. But the response by Samantha Power chilled me, and I'm being serious. I couldn't think less of Samantha Power based on her record in the Obama administration. But for her to say, be careful, you don't want to make John Brennan mad. What the hell does that mean? That's a threat.
I mean, honestly, people say crazy things on Twitter. I'm not sure if she had to do all over again. That's the sentiment that she wanted to express. I mean, what she's saying, and I think her Republican counterparts would say the same thing, which is you get on the wrong side of people who know all the secrets, you may want to rethink that. That's all.
Do you want to live in a society where elected officials are held hostage by the permanent bureaucracy? Is that really what you want? Because that's what we've got.
I don't think look, again, there's a twisted version of what happened here. The FBI helped Donald Trump.
No, John Brennan and Samantha Power is threatening Trump with a retired CIA director with the knowledge he's gathered during government service.
She's super retired. She's not in a position to threaten anybody, right?
She ought to be in trouble for what she did to the world.
Well, you can make that recommendation to Jeff Sessions next time you have him on your set. But again, the twisted aspect of this is during the campaign, the FBI broke the rules that hurt Hillary Clinton. They sat on the information about Trump. She lost, he won, and now they're saying somehow, that the FBI was in her camp.
Let's just close out the conversation with this. If this report becomes public this spring, imminently, and it becomes clear that McCabe wasn't straightforward to investigators, he lied, he misled, will you concede that at very least he ought to be fired? And by the way, why isn't he being indicted for that?
Well, I'm saying if it turns out that there's proof beyond a reasonable doubt that he lied to investigators, absolutely.
Then why treat him as a hero now? Why is the left extending job offers? Oh, no, he's our new Rosa Parks. Like, what is this? The guy's accused of lying.
Because this was an effort by the president through tweets, unprecedented, to go after one guy to discredit him because he was going to corroborate Comey, whose book is coming out. That's what's going on here. Sorry.
Richard, thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, there's more evidence that local officials ignored ample warning signs from the Parkland shooter, Nicholas Cruz, and that may be why that tragedy happened in the first place. We've got details. Stay tuned.
This program is...
Parkland shooter Nicholas Cruz was an extremely dangerous young man just waiting to explode in an act of a massive violence. And apparently almost everybody who came into regular contact with him, including many in positions of authority, were well aware of that. We know that. The details have surfaced, and yet somehow officials ignored countless warning signs, thereby allowing that massacre to occur. Fox correspondent Matt Finn has been investigating the details of the Parkland shooting since it happened. Matt?
Tucker, medical records appear to indicate that Stoneman Douglas staff and that disgraced school resource officer wanted Nicholas Cruz committed against his will because Cruz allegedly wrote the word kill in a notebook and expressed his desire to use a gun. The documents indicated in September of 2016, Nicholas Cruz was evaluated at least once by a medical professional after school staff contacted a behavioral health center, warning that they were very concerned with Cruz's behavior. The school resource officer, Scott Peterson, reportedly warned that Cruz should be involuntarily committed under Florida's Baker Act, which makes it legal for authorities to briefly commit someone who's deemed a danger to themselves or others. However, despite the school's warnings, Cruz was never committed, apparently because he might not have admitted his intent to use a gun or hurt people. A portion of the documents obtained by Fox News read, quote, SRO, school resource officer, and 2 school counselors present report that client Cruz allegedly told a peer that he drank gasoline last week and was throwing up, had cut himself, and wearing long sleeves, and also that he allegedly told a peer that he had a gun at home and was thinking of using it. The documents read that Cruz reportedly told clinicians, quote, the client states that he had strep throat last week and was throwing up. The client denies owning a gun. Client states that he owns a pellet gun and expressed to clinician that he's incapable of causing serious harm. The documents then seem to indicate that the clinician and a school resource officer decided not to initiate that Baker Act. Reading part, clinician explained that she cannot Baker Act if the client is denying an intent and a plan. But then it also reads the clinician spoke to guidance counselor again, who reported the school resource officer does not want to initiate a Baker Act because he does not believe he meets the criteria. Today, the Broward County Public Schools tells Fox News it has launched an independent review into how it handled Nicholas Cruz's social and emotional services. And tonight we are learning that Nicholas Cruz's brother, Zachary Cruz, was just arrested for trespassing on the property of Stoneman Douglas High School. Tucker.
Matt, thanks for your reporting tonight and for the past couple of weeks. It's been great.
Thank you,
well,
Tucker.
this weekend, thousands of people will descend on Washington, D.C. for a gun control rally, and gross failures by law enforcement somehow are unlikely to be on that agenda. Hopefully the protest goes better than the one in Chicago, where dozens of students walking out of school used their free time as an excuse to vandalize and loot a local Walmart. You're seeing pictures on the screen. Dan Bongino was an NRA television contributor and a former Secret Service agent. Dan, thanks for coming on. So, look, I think I know some of the people going to the march over the weekend, and I think a lot of them are just upset about the school shootings. They're not all for specific policy recommendations, and some of them are open-minded. And that's why I think it's so important to be honest about what the lessons of this shooting are. And at least one of them is the authorities failed. Why is that being lost?
Well, it's being lost, Tucker, because there really isn't a gun debate. There isn't a debate about firearms. There is one side of the Democrat Party, the radical far left, that believes in confiscation and will stop at nothing less. Then there is a more moderate side of the Democrat Party, and to be fair, some Republicans here as well, who, for some reason, Tucker, believe, despite any evidence, that additional obstacles for legal gun owners is somehow going to stop the criminal element from society and wipe the stain of evil from their hearts. It's frustrating because, Tucker, we did nothing wrong. Legal gun owners are saying to themselves all across America, I guarantee, I see it on social media, I deal with it on my own show, they're saying to themselves, well, why me? Why do I now have to wait 3 days to buy a firearm in Florida? I didn't do anything wrong.
Don't you think what's going on is very recognizable to anybody who's lived in the world? This is blame shifting. This is people who made a series of massive and inexcusable mistakes, blaming everyone else for their mistakes. Why are the authorities in Parkland, Broward County, the feds, they're all getting away with this? I don't understand how they're getting away with this.
Tucker, the why always matters here. And this is what the far left always does. The failures here before, during, and after this tragedy were clearly on the government side.
Yes.
But there is a portion of the far left that understands full well, the central planners, the anointed ones, as Thomas Sowell would call them, who can't get across this message to America. They can't have it out there that the planners are no smarter than any of you, that the laws they designed are being largely ignored, that criminals, that there's an evil component of society, and that they can't plan this away. There's no reorganization of people that really smart bureaucrats are going to do that is going to solve this. It's just the conflict of visions, as he says, and they're never going to intersect at any point. But liberals can't acknowledge that. That's why the smokescreen is there. Let's blame the gun, but let's ignore the problems with government.
Yeah, or ignore the 4 armed deputies that stood outside while 17 people got murdered. It's not their fault. It's really the NRA's fault. Yeah, okay. Dan, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Yes,
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, the identities of Americans are being stolen literally by the millions by people here illegally, and nobody is getting in trouble for it. Should we be surprised? We'll investigate that next. A recent piece in National Geographic tells you a lot about demographics in America and about how bewilderingly fast they're changing without any real public debate on the subject. The magazine profiles the small coal mining town of Hazleton, Pennsylvania. In the year 2000, Hazleton's population was 2% Hispanic. Just 16 years later, Hazleton is majority Hispanic. That's a lot of change. People who grew up in Hazleton return to find out they can't communicate with the people who now live there. And that's bewildering for people. That's happening all over the country. No nation, no society has ever changed this much, this fast. Now, before you start calling anyone bigoted, consider and be honest, how would you feel if that happened in your neighborhood? It doesn't matter how nice the immigrants are. They probably are nice. Most immigrants are nice. That's not the point. The point is, this is more change than human beings are designed to digest. This pace of change makes societies volatile, really volatile, just as ours has become volatile. And notice where this change is not happening. Any place our leaders live. They caused all of this with their reckless immigration policies, and yet their own neighborhoods are basically unchanged. They look like it's 1960. No demographic change at all in their zip codes. Our leaders are for diversity, just not where they live. Well, people here illegally apparently aren't just immune from being deported. They're also immune from prosecution for identity theft and the crime of using false documents. According to a Treasury Department report from 2011 to 2016, the IRS detected 1.3 million cases of identity theft perpetrated by illegal aliens, but they couldn't cite a single case that was referred for prosecution. Not one. Huh! Terry Jeffrey is editor-in-chief of CNSnews.com. That broke that story, and he joins us tonight. Terry, I'm confused because after 9/11, I remember vividly a bunch of the hijackers of the 19 were using fake documents. And Congress passed laws that really penalized anybody who committed identity theft or used fake federal documents. And here you have millions of people doing it, and none is prosecuted?
And the IRS knows all about it. There's no doubt. It is a felony to falsely use someone else's Social Security number or to make up a Social Security number. And what we have here, Tucker, is a long-term policy, I believe, by the IRS simply to ignore it because they want the tax money paid by people. Back in 1996, the IRS issued something they called an Individual Taxpayer Identification Number. It goes by the acronym ITIN.
Yeah.
And in 1999, the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration, who oversees the IRS, called it a policy by the IRS to legalize illegal aliens. That's what the Inspector General called it 19 years ago. But what we see now, according to the Inspector General, is that between 2011 and 2016, 1.3 million taxpayers who were legitimately paying their taxes, who had Social Security numbers that belonged to them, the IRS actually marked their taxpayer accounts because they were victims of identity theft by people the IRS had issued ITINs to. Now, what we know about someone who has an ITIN who's working in the United States is they are by definition an illegal alien. You cannot get an ITIN unless you're a foreign national, and you have to prove it to the IRS. And you also can't get one if you're eligible to have a Social Security number and work in the United States. So the IRS even has conceded to the Inspector General in the past that the aliens who have ITINs and then file tax returns with W-2s because they were working in the United States were illegal aliens.
So I've wondered this for a long time. You've got 11 million, probably more, illegal aliens in the United States. The majority of them are working. In fact, we're told that they're doing irreplaceable work. By definition, if you're here illegally and working, you're using fake federal documents. By definition.
Yeah, there is.
But why is that not a threat to our national security?
Well, it is. There's no doubt about it. And as you said, I mean, if you go back, there was a staff report actually done by the 9/11 Commission, where they talked about the how, in fact, the people who were involved in the 9/11 attack exploited some of the things that illegal aliens do to create an identity in the United States in order to create an identity for themselves. But there is a little bit of a black market where illegal aliens are working in the United States. They're getting paid under the table.
Of course they are. That's right. I mean, if you go pick them up the back of a truck in the Walmart parking lot, for sure.
Right.
This is anything about it.
Yes.
So can I use fake federal documents?
No, you'd be committing a felony, and I think they'd go after Tucker Carlson. You're right, Tucker. There's actually two groups here. There's this group that have these ITINs where they've actually gone to the IRS. They've proven I'm an alien. I'm not eligible for a Social Security number. Give me the ITIN. And then go out and work using someone else's Social Security number. That's these cases that the Inspector General talked about. But there's another case, and the Social Security Administration has what they call the earnings suspense file. These are W-2s that are filed with the IRS and the Social Security Administration by an employer where the name doesn't match the Social Security number, and after investigation, the Social Security Administration cannot figure out who this was filed on behalf of. They've known for years most of them are filed on behalf of illegal aliens who are using either fake or stolen Social Security numbers. That, too, is a felony, and the IRS and the Social Security Administration knows the employers that are filing massive numbers of those.
It's unbelievable.
And they let them get away with it.
But I'm not allowed to have a fake passport.
No.
No, I'm not. Okay. Terry, thank you for that. I think it's a really interesting story that nobody ever talks about, and I hope we'll keep doing it. Thank you. Well, a serial bomber is terrorizing Houston. How great is the danger? Can it be stopped? We've got details next. A serial bomber is terrorizing the city of Austin, Texas. On Sunday night, 2 cyclists were injured after setting off what appears to have been a tripwire connected to a bomb. It's the 4th bombing in that city in just 3 weeks. Terry Turchi is a former FBI Deputy Assistant Director of Counterterrorism, and he joins us tonight. Terry, thanks for coming on. So,
Thank you, Tucker.
Is there, from what we know about these explosions, is there anything that connects them, a theme?
Well, I don't think we know of a theme that connects them. Right now, the best information, Tucker, we're going to have is the forensics aspect of them. That's what's going to help us, at least in these initial days, to try to put all of this together, because the people at the lab, ATF lab, the police lab, the FBI's lab, are going to be able to look at every little aspect of crime debris, of things found at crime scenes, and everything from switches in bombs to the explosive main charges to the way the containment vessels were designed. All of these things are part of the bomber's signature. So they're going to be able to tell us, first of all, if they've ever seen something like this before. Even, for example, you talk about tripwires. So one of the things that tripwires conjures up is the idea of somebody maybe from the military, or maybe someone who was part of some guerrilla warfare movement at some point in time. They can go back and make some educated guesses of the person's skills and talents and where they picked them up from looking at the way the bomb was assembled, and then we go from there. But you just can't underestimate, particularly now that we've only had, and I say only, it's very sad and tragic, but that's not a lot of bombings to be able to tell a lot yet, although the lab can tell a great deal from the forensics.
Huh. So there was early speculation, reckless speculation by the press that these were racially motivated, which obviously would be the last thing this country needs. Now it looks like the victims were black, white, Hispanic, so there's no obvious racial pattern here. Again, thank heaven. But can you think, are there other motives that come immediately to mind?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because here's what I learned from Unabomb and from the Olympic bombing, Tucker. Even in leading the task forces there, we tried to stay away from motive. Now, motive is important if you may have a name, but when you're trying to get on the trail to identify a subject, you can absolutely find yourself definitely in the swamp. And think back, just a couple of examples. After the Oklahoma City bombing, all of the uproar and all the crying about the Middle Eastern Arabs, quote, being involved in that turned out to obviously be domestic terrorism. But think about anthrax. In the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks and then the anthrax attacks, which were just literally weeks later, there was this tremendous push to literally blame that on Saddam Hussein and Iraq. And in fact, I can tell you straight out that the FBI at that point in time was involved in confrontations with the Department of Justice to slow that thinking down.
I remember.
Because even then early on, even then
I
early
remember
on,
Bill
said,
Kristol getting out there and saying, yeah, we think that Saddam did this as a pretext for a war in Iraq. It was, of course, all lying and propaganda as usual. Quickly, these were not sent. Is that correct? These were placed, apparently, outside homes? That seems odd to me.
It is odd, and here's what it suggests. When you go into a residential neighborhood and you walk up on somebody's porch and you place a package, or you go out into another residential neighborhood and you take the time that's required to place and then set and prepare a tripwire bomb to go off, you're really probably familiar, or at least at the very least feel very comfortable in that kind of surrounding. I'll give you a quick example. 2 bombings in 1982 and 1985 at Corey Hall at UC Berkeley as part of the Unabomb series of events. Well, why was that so comfortable for somebody to go into the narrow hallways of Corey Hall twice? Well, as it turns out, Theodore Kaczynski taught math at the building right around the corner. Right. So those are the kind of things that we can learn from the past, and hopefully those are the kind of things we can apply to these kinds of situations now, because right now, even though it does appear very random and very tough, I guarantee you that over time, as they stay with the facts and they separate fact, fiction, and theory, they'll start seeing patterns develop that will be unique and applicable to the person they're looking for. And eventually, they'll be able to give the public the right information. And as we know from the history of working together, law enforcement, the media, and the public, all of these things can be brought together and solved.
Well, that's what happened with Unabomb, of course. Terry, thank you very much. Good to see you tonight.
You bet.
Well, a city councilman here in Washington, D.C. says that bad weather is part of an international plot by Jewish bankers. Naturally. Mark Stein weighs in on that claim next. Washington, D.C. experienced a mild snowfall last week. Luckily, city councilman Trayon White was on it. He knows why it happened. Watch this.
It just started snowing out of nowhere this morning, man. Y'all better pay attention to this climate control, man. This climate manipulation. And D.C. keep talking about we're a resilient city. And that's a model based off the Rothschilds controlling the climate to create natural disasters. They can pay for it and own the cities, man. Be careful.
Yep, the Rothschilds control the climate. The Rothschilds, of course, are a wealthy Jewish banking clan. They're included in a great many conspiracy theories, but those theories rarely give them credit for the weather. That's an ambitious new twist. Mark Stein is an author and columnist and a part-time meteorologist, and he joins us tonight. What do you make of it? So this is, by the way, I live here, so you can laugh all you want, but that's actually my city councilman speaking there. The Rothschilds control the weather. Did you know that?
I did actually, Tucker. They bought the weather from God back in 1929 when he had a bit of a liquidity problem after the Wall Street crash. And they keep it in the wine cellars at the Chateau Mouton Rothschild estate in France. And they're able to micro-target the climate. For example, it was light snow in your part of Washington, but I gather in the stairwell of Trayon White's apartment building, he actually had an avalanche just on his floor. That's how micro-targeted the big Jew weather machine is able to be. And by the way, you may think it's a light snowfall, but if you actually examine it, it's actually small pieces of gefilte fish, which is why it doesn't melt. And that's why the Jews control the snowplow business. So they scoop all the gefilte fish in Washington away, and they use it to make Louis Farrakhan Calypso albums, which they put out to discredit Louis Farrakhan from telling the truth about the synagogue of Satan. It all makes sense.
See, the funny thing is, I don't know if it's funny, it's actually so appalling and shocking that it's hard to, I'm just going to laugh about it. That was what you made me feel better about a city out of control. So then I want to run this by you. Maybe you can make me feel better about this too. There's a new uproar on social media over microaggressions at UC Santa Cruz. The school has assembled a list of microaggressions. It warns that phrases like America is the land of opportunity and I believe the most qualified person should get the job are offensive and verboten. The weirdest thing, though, the scariest thing, this list has been in use for years, and there's no sign it's going away. Do you abide by this list, Mark?
I thought it was an interesting list. It's interesting they banned the expression America is a land of opportunity because America is a land of opportunity. Let's say you're a person with no talents but a degree of hucksterism who's figured out that you could get a job, a tenured job as the assistant dean of microaggressions and put teenagers, saddle them with 6 figures of debt, for attempting to criminalize basic social interactions by holding big lectures on microaggressions. Now, America is such a land of opportunity. You can clean up big time if you do that. If you tried to do that in, say, Sudan, no one will come to your lecture on microaggressions because in Sudan they'd think you were an obvious huckster, and the only people who'd be at your lecture would be a camel who came in to get out of the rain and some guy and his child bride who'd actually taken a wrong turn on the way to the female genital mutilation clinic. So only America is such a boundless land of opportunity that becoming an expert, if you become an expert in microaggressions, young people will saddle themselves with $250,000 of debt just to receive your wisdom.
Even by your high standards, tonight was an all-time high watermark. Thank you, Mark Stein. You made me feel so much better. I can't even stand it. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Tucker. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, zombie regulations from the Obama administration could destroy America's cigar industry. Why? Nobody knows. The most famous cigar maker in the world joins us on set next. Rocky Patel. Coming up. There's just so much barking and noise and yelling. Our role is to take 3 steps back and discern what really matters.
The most important thing that we do, we are looking out for the forgotten men and women in this country.
They're going to get a straight shooter, no holds barred. I'm not going to cut people slack. The viewers expect that.
Fox is the one place where dissent is allowed.
We have voices. We won't be silent.
Who controls my voice? Nobody.
America's cigar industry, which is vibrant and impressive, could be on the brink of collapse. Why? Because of holdover regulations from the Obama administration. Until 2016, cigars were unregulated in this country, and it worked fine. But then the FDA suddenly declared that it had the power to regulate them somehow. And so they've come up with new regulations banning cigar giveaways, imposing new fees on companies, and requiring extensive FDA testing before companies release new cigars. The FDA admits these regulations will destroy companies and jobs, but they say it doesn't matter because there are lots of jobs in America. For real, you can read it. They say that. Rocky Patel is the owner of Rocky Patel Premium Cigars. He's one of the most, probably the most famous cigar maker in this country, and he joins us tonight. Rocky, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Tucker.
I missed it. Did someone vote for this? Did voters say they wanted this?
Absolutely not. In fact, Congress never intended premium cigars to be regulated. They only intended smokeless and cigarettes to be regulated. So the FDA took it upon themselves to decide to one glove fits all size approach and start regulating the premium cigar industry. They didn't take the opportunity to investigate and understand the nature of the premium cigar industry. Basically, it's family-owned businesses that have been making cigars over decades. The retailers are Main Street mom-and-pop industries that are selling premium cigars to adults. The average cigar smoker smokes 1 cigar per month. They're 4.5 years old. The cigars are marketed in luxury lifestyle magazines like Cigar Aficionado, next to premium cars, watches, fine spirits. They're literally enjoyed like a single malt glass of scotch or a fine bottle of wine. So it's very different. You certainly don't see kids sitting around the schoolyard or outside the schoolyard chain smoking cigars.
Of course. They're not paying $11 for, they're using the Juul. They're smoking marijuana. Nobody seems to care, by the way. But now they're basically going to crush your industry to help whom?
Absolutely. It's ridiculous. They haven't really taken the time to understand the nature of our industry. It is a cottage industry. It's an artisan industry. It's very, very unique. It takes us 4 to 5 years to make a premium cigar. By the time we plant a seedling in the ground, the time you get a cigar in a box, 300 different hands touch the tobacco. We're very proud, like a fine winemaker, about the quality and the craftsmanship, about how we make a cigar. And these rules are so outrageous. They're so burdensome, they're impossible to comply with. It's basically de facto prohibition.
You started your company by yourself. You're an immigrant. You're a lawyer. You came to this country. You had how many employees when you started?
That's correct. We started three employees out of
How many
garage,
now?
basically. Well, about 2,500 to 3,500 employees directly or indirectly.
That's unbelievable. So the terrifying thing finally about this is it doesn't seem like there's much you can do. What do you do if you're a business and you learn that some regulation has been written by an unelected bureaucrat that's going to destroy you?
You know, it's crazy because it's going to wipe out 70% of these family-owned manufacturing factories and companies that have been created and descended over generations. About 50% of these mom-and-pop retail stores in mainstream America are going to be jobless and out of business because we can't introduce new products to them. The cost of constituent testing, chemical testing, they don't even have machines for things like that.
The Trump people
the warning stickers that go on our beautiful boxes that are, that have our vintages and tell our family story and tell our history, all that is taken away from us. So these laws are made in such a way, it's regs like that, you just can't comply.
So, but the Obama people, we're almost out of time. The Obama people did this.
Absolutely.
The Trump people didn't. Why is it still good? No one voted for Obama again.
I bet you that the Trump organization and the people at the White House aren't even aware of what's going on with this regulation. So this all happened during the Obama regime. This was all passed through. And, presently we have a couple bills pending on both sides of the aisle. We're trying to get this omnibus bill presently to get our language attached to exempt premium cigars from this regulation. We have a lawsuit filed, but, we're hoping that the Trump administration is aware of what's going to happen to the entire industry that is going to be tens and tens of thousands of jobs and about 500,000 jobs in Central America, affecting the immigration.
Right, exactly. All of them
issues and everything else.
Rocky Patel, we're rooting for you. This is senseless, and thank you for fighting back. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
That's it for us tonight. We will be back tomorrow night. We'll hope you'll join us then. Good night from Washington. Here's Sean.
All right, Tucker, great show, and welcome to Hannity Tonight. Breaking news.